I have never owned an internal combustion engine car of my own. So in 2017, while I was just 1 year into my tenure working at Tesla as an intern, I bought a Model 3 and immediately sent it down to Unplugged Performance down in LA, had them kind of wrap it for me, make it a unique color. And a week later, I flew down to LA and autopilot wasn't even working right, but we set off on our Cannonball run. My first attempt ever at a Cannonball run. I had basically been following the stories of what it was like and saw that with the Model 3 having newer battery cells and a much faster charging curve would be able to beat anyone that had ever done it before. So we set off knowing that we had a high probability of actually setting the record. And so me and my friend who also worked at Tesla at the time just kind of set off as fast as we reasonably could. Without much speeding though, we were easily able to take the record from Bradley D'Souza and Jordan Hart. It was just so much faster charging that we could really casually drive across the country and prove what electric vehicles could do then. And relatively easily, we set a time in 2017 of 51 hours and 17 minutes. The Model 3 was my first personal vehicle ever. I had borrowed cars from my parents while I was in college and high school, but I had never purchased a car before the Tesla. And that was something, especially once I kind of knew what electric vehicles were doing and when they'd be kind of coming to the point that I could afford one. I really wanted that $35,000 Model 3, and I ended up spending $56,000 on my first vehicle. So almost my entire post-tax salary for my first year at Tesla went into my actual Tesla because that was just the car that I had to have. And again, to do the Cannonball and to really understand what Tesla was doing, I wanted to have one of the first ones. I fortunately had enough money invested in Tesla where it made a difference to me. Having my career and my investments in Tesla, I wanted to know, is the product really what they're preaching? And is this company really going to be successful in the way that they think they will? Because while the Model S and X were great, that wasn't really a mass market car. That wasn't really delivering upon their mission. And so when they finally were delivering a car that was aligned with their mission, I wanted to see, is this really going to work? Because they had to sell hundreds of thousands to be successful as a company. Otherwise, honestly, they were going to go out of business if they did not sell that car well. And once I saw how great it was, it just hardened my conviction that electric vehicles and Tesla was going to be successful. I have never owned an internal combustion engine car of my own. I've driven my parents' Toyota MR2 Spider for several years, as well as a Lexus LX470. So I had the almost polar opposites in terms of a tiny gas mid-engine sports car and a big SUV, which is great for what I was looking for. When I was working at Tesla, I'd had my parents' Lexus up in Oregon. When I went to school, we'd go up to the mountains in a big SUV, and then I'd come back to California for my internship, and I'd be driving a little sports car. It was pretty great. It was a good life. And then at the end of the day, we ended up selling both of those to CarMax for $2,000 each, which I think a lot of car fans would say that Lexus LX470 could have been an Overlander, and that MR2 Spider could have been a track car. And I wanted to buy them both, but what ended up happening is we hadn't sold those two cars yet when I bought my Model 3. I drove my Model 3 around for a month, and it was the day before I was taking them to CarMax. And I was like, I should really try both these out again. And I got into the MR2 Spider. I was excited to go through the Steptronic shifting again, and I was waiting for the gears to shift. It's just so slow. And obviously the car doesn't have a lot of horsepower, but the transmission, the time that takes to shift gears, I was just like, I could be a quarter mile ahead by now. So I didn't want to drive it anymore. It changed what I thought vehicles could be because I didn't really know performance. I just know what a tiny sports car with a loud engine right behind you felt like, and then I knew what like a large SUV felt like. But when I had the Model 3, it was the perfect blend of both. I did want really what Model Y ended up becoming. That's really more of the size of a vehicle that is ideal for my lifestyle. But the 3 at the time was, I couldn't have been happier. Now, again, with the Model S being so much better, it's not the step change that it used to be with the Model 3, but still with better charging and kind of efficient planning. There's also more 250 kilowatt stations than ever before out on the road right now. So we were able to charge faster at those stations and set a time of 42 hours and 17 minutes. One of the most exciting things for me about our new time is that When you type into Google the Portofino Hotel to the Red Ball Garage, it says you'll do it in about 42 hours. And effectively, we've now brought electric vehicles to parity with an ICE car, because if you drive quickly and charge quickly, you can do it in the same time it would take the average person to drive an ICE car across the country. So the tool that we use to plan our trip is a Better Route Planner. It's a tool that a lot of EV road trippers will use to pre-plan their trips, and you can mess with a whole bunch of variables such as wind speed, charge state, battery degradation. You can do quite a bit in there, and it looks even at weather, existing or estimated weather, to help establish like what you should expect for your drive. For anyone that's driven an EV, your car may say you've got 300 miles of range, but if you're going uphill in the cold, you're not going to achieve 300 miles. So driving quickly across country, you're obviously not going to get your estimated range. And so the car is not going to do as good of a job of estimating your actual range. So we used a Better Route Planner to pre-plan our entire trip, including every single charge stop, looking at what charge we should expect that we need to get to our next stop. Because if the car said, hey, you're good to go at 40% and we drove too fast, we might not even make it to the next charger. So we did everything we could to pre-plan to make sure instead of charging to those 40% metrics, we'd charge to 52 just so we could drive more aggressively. And it really is a matter of balancing efficiency with speed for these cars, because again, you start to lose out on charge speed as the battery fills up. Our goal was to maximize our charge speed. We often found that the best way to do that was unplugging around 50%. And that was also conveniently where Tesla has spaced out their chargers, allowing for the older vehicles that have about 200 miles of range or 250 or so to make it between chargers without fear of running out at normal highway speeds. The yoke is interesting. It was something that I like when you're in a straightaway, and it honestly isn't a problem with kind of minor highway driving. Those turns are never really a problem. It was a little bit frustrating sometimes when we were backing into a charging spot. And honestly, the only other time that I really even noticed I was driving with the yoke, well, I guess two other times. One is when I was using autopilot at 93 miles per hour. It's not even the yoke shape, it's the thickness to the yoke. It's not a round grip. It is kind of a thick grip. And so when I'm like cradling it, it's kind of a weird grip when you're cradling the wheel and just supporting it on autopilot or just cradling it, period. Right at the start line, we found that the driver's door didn't want to shut. Somehow the door handle sensor always detected something was pulling it open. So we repeatedly had to shut it until it just shut up, until it stopped. So on the way there, it would open itself. Like we'd be getting in, we'd unplug from the charger and the door would open itself. Just a crack, but it wouldn't go into drive. So we had to shut it again, shut it again, shut it again. Sometimes what we'd actually do is we'd have the passenger unplug just so that we could have already shut the driver's door minutes earlier, just to make sure that we could take off when it was time. Because that definitely ate maybe 10 or 15 minutes on our overall time to New York. And then I learned via an employee at Tesla how to basically reset the door. And once we reset it, the door handle wouldn't pop out. And the new problem was the door wouldn't open. So the driver's door, we had to press on the door handle an unknown number of times. Sometimes it was one time, sometimes it was 30 times. It was just repeatedly tapping it. It did not seem as if firmness mattered, whether it was light or a firm tap. Some consecutive number of times tapping that door handle and it would eventually open the door the same way that it had previously forced itself open. It would finally just release and then we'd get in. So we'd sometimes leave the window down or open it from the passenger side. But from the exterior of the vehicle, we had massive problems with that door handle during our run. The only other issue that we had with our specific vehicle was the hood latch gave us a warning. It claimed that it was opening and it wasn't. It never prevented us from driving, fortunately, but it definitely warned us that it needed service because we'd be out of charger and it would look like the car was talking with the animation just opening and closing. So this Model S could have been purchased for about $80,000 if you reserved it early. But if you were to reserve it today, it's going to be $95,000 because Tesla's slowly marched up that price. So with the wheels and tires that we ran, somewhere between $80,000 and $95,000. Having the unlimited miles made it totally worth it, and especially for a car of that caliber, it was worth it. But it was still more expensive than what I was hoping to do. I was hoping to buy my Model S for $80,000. Rent it out on Turo for a couple months, do the Cannonball run, and sell it for $90,000. And maybe we'll still buy one, but it definitely probably will not be used for another Cannonball. Tesla versus Taycan, Tesla versus Lucid. There's definitely an efficiency, a luxury sedan race at hand. And I think that Tesla offers what they believe to be the best well-rounded solution. And there's definitely variations on that. Lucid's going for more of the overall luxury and trying to preach that luxury story. And as a result, with them having not as good of a charging infrastructure because they're leaning on Electrify America, just like Porsche is, they're going to have to compensate, and they're compensating with range and efficiency. And so that's an interesting take on luxury when it's more about range and efficiency. And then the Porsche, I think, is a more sporty option as well. So you really have either end of Tesla covered in terms of the higher end markets. And so I think Tesla kind of knows that and knows who their customer is, and their customer cares mostly about that total experience package, like just being relatively simple so that they can really lean on their supercharging network for that, their user interface, their app, and make a car that maybe isn't as nice as luxurious, but ends up selling to more of a luxury market because it has these other attributes that the other cars just can't deliver on.